So, maybe time to start slowly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for finding the time to attend these workshops. This is the first IP workshop that we're doing in the course of Quantifam project. Let me give you a little bit about the purpose of the workshop, about the content we're going to discuss today, and about future steps. So, first of all, the purpose of the workshop is to familiarize those who are not already familiar with issues related to intellectual property rights and its management in the context of European projects. The idea here is that we all get on the same page, we understand the same jargon, and we develop a consensus on what do we mean when we're discussing about intellectual property rights. The second is to discuss a little bit about protection measures of intellectual property. At this point, I would like to highlight that protection of intellectual property is a highly complex technical and legal assignment. It goes beyond the scope of the project, which means we as Foodscale Hub, we are in charge of the IP management of the project, but by any means, we are not a legal company that will help you protect your IP of this project or etc. We're just providing you the knowledge, and we're just providing the framework upon which you understand how and what you can protect. And if you realize that you need to protect it, you certainly need to address it to the people who are specialized for the legal part of the protection, which is normally law firms which are specialized in protection of intellectual property rights. Then we would like to capitalize upon the work we've done previously in exploitation workshops, where we already discussed about the key exploitable results and how the partners are connecting them with their own foreground and background protection rights, so that we put everything into the table. This is supposed to initiate a discussion. This is supposed to help you understand when we have key exploitable results, what you can protect, how you can protect it, what can you publish, how can you publish it, and generally speaking, develop a common modus operandi on how we're going to function this as a whole. And of course, we are going to also work on the part of questions and answers related to the topic, where we'll receive questions. The ones that we will be able to respond directly, we will respond directly. Other ones, if they are complicated or legal, we will have to consult also our team and come back to you. During the presentation, I will try to stop at certain times to pick up a few questions. So if you have a question, you can also write it in the dialog box. I cannot see the dialog box while I'm presenting. This is a technicality of Zoom. But when we stop, I can also freeze my screen from time to time, take the questions, and then continue. Or if there are questions, my colleagues, Alkis, Dimitris, or Nefeli, can inform me about the questions, and I can take them from there. Are we all okay to start? Perfect. So the first distinction one needs to make is between intellectual property and intellectual property rights. Intellectual property is mostly this creation of our mind. It's an intangible asset that we can possibly trade. This most of the time includes some invention, some software code, some new method, some manual, some design, some symbols, some work of art. Okay, in this project, I hope we will not do work of art or music, but still we can do videos, books, and roadmaps. What is now the intellectual property rights? The intellectual property rights is exactly the rights which are associated with this intangible asset. This is something that is owned by a natural person, or it's owned by a company, and it's protected not to be used without the owner's consent. These things include like patents, copyrights, industrial designs, database rights, trademarks, utility models, trade secrets, know-how, confidential information, etc. Now, one thing about the intellectual property rights, there is a very important distinction to make, and this is between registerable and unregisterable property rights, meaning there are some intellectual property rights that we can register and some that we cannot register. For example, or we don't need to register. For example, in the case of literary or artistic works or related rights or databases, etc., the fact that we are the authors ourselves is very often enough to help us protected. There is some industrial property. This one includes trademarks, patents, utility models, and industrial designs. This one is something that in order to be protected, it needs to be registered under a certain legal procedure, and there is a framework for that. And there is the gray zone between the so-called soft IP. What is the soft IP? These are the trade secrets, the know-how, and the confidential information. Obviously, you cannot register this as a right, meaning you cannot go to the patent office and say, I know a trade secret and I want to register it for you, because from the moment you reveal it, it stops being a trade secret. In this case, the protection relies on you because you have to protect them through technical means. It means you have to protect them sometimes by making specific contracts with the personnel or the people who are who have access to it, not to give it further. Some other times you need to make sure that technically you're protecting it by not giving access to people who are not authorized to have access to this information. But generally speaking, the trade secret, know-how, and confidential information is a topic which is also relies on the gray zone because it's something that you are responsible to protect it, and there is no one to help you with that. Now, why it is important to protect intellectual property? This is practically an exclusive right that allows your organization to prevent competitors from using intangible assets you have created. But in order to really stop your competitors from protecting it, for using them, you need to protect them. Ownership is not the same as protection. So your intellectual property assets needs to be protected, managed, and enforced. This means that if I have, for example, if I have intellectual property rights, if I have an intangible asset created in my company, which is related to a new production method, first of all, I need to go to the patent office to protect it, to get the patent. Second, I need to make sure that every time I sell it, I clarify to everyone who is in this value chain that this is owned and protected by me. And third, indeed, if someone violates my property rights by copying this method and using them elsewhere, I need to be able to have legal means to enforce my property rights by claiming remuneration or by stopping them from using them. So you understand that protection, management, and enforcement are all part of the same circle of intellectual property rights. Let's look a little bit at the different types of protection measures depending on the particular topic. For example, for a book, for a computer program, and a database, the copyright is enough to protect your intellectual property, your intangible assets. For inventions, you can use patents and utility models. For innovative designs, which are either technical or aesthetic aspects of a product, you need the so-called industrial designs. For your brand, your logo, your specific slogan, you can use the trademark. And now, the information that is offers you some competitive advantage, or you need to maintain its secrecy, etc. This is a trade secret. Then there are some other products, particularly in the food sector, that have a specific geographical origin that gives them particular qualitative characteristics, like wine from Bordeaux, or cheese from an island of Greece, or some olive oil from Portugal, etc. These are all have geographical indications. And when it comes to new plant varieties that are new, distinctive, and stable, there is a plant variety protection. In all cases, the owner needs to be proactive in protecting those rights. It doesn't mean that by definition, if you produce, for example, cheese in a Greek island, by definition, your cheese would be protected. You need to make the specific origin trade indication, but you also need, in case someone is trying to sell cheese under the same name, you have to be able to enforce them to stop it. Some principles related to the protection measures have to do with the rights conferred, have to do with the place, with the geographical aspect, but also have to do with the time aspect. Let's look at them one by one. The principle of territoriality means that IP rights are actually territorialized. I can protect this invention for Greece, for Europe, or globally. But I have to define the place that I'm protecting my invention geographically. Then I have to put what type of rights include the protection. An IP right grants its owner to a temporary monopoly. It means that without my authorization, nobody can use, commercialize the protected asset. They have first to talk to me and then take it further. But this protection, this right doesn't hold, this monopoly doesn't hold forever. For example, for a copyright, the copyright exists 7 years, 70 years after the death of the author. So if we write a book today and we die, then for 70 years, our ancestors will be having the right to receive royalties for the book we wrote. After that, anybody can publish our books. The books of Plato or the book of Aristotle or the book of Cervantes do not have copyright. The patent is 20 years after its application. And industrial design is 25 years after the registration. And the trademarks are indefinite. Coca-Cola, so for example, would last forever as long as renewal fees are paid. Now, when it comes to patents, we have to remember that the patent is a title that gives to the inventor the exclusive right to prevent others from possessing it, using it, selling it, manufacturing, or importing it outside of the territory that the patent has been designed to exist. It's very important to be able to distinguish on what is patentable and what is not patentable. In Europe, only technical inventions can be patented, and they can be patented for 20 years and with a limited geographical area. So, an invention can be patented only if it is patentable as a matter, as a subject, if there is a clear novelty, if there is an inventive step, and if there is industrial patent applicability. What is not patentable, for example, based on the framework I described, are scientific theories. You cannot patent a scientific formula. You cannot patent a mathematical method. You cannot patent some rule, scheme, or method for doing business. You cannot patent the presentation of information, and you cannot patent source codes. Also, there are cases that if clearly something that you are trying to patent goes against the public order, the public morality, you may be able, there may be a possibility that you will not be allowed to patent it. One thing to remember about this is that patent documents are published, which means that the knowledge inside the patent is accessible to the public. And also that the patent is giving its owner the right to prevent others from using this knowledge, from selling, for importing. It doesn't prevent them from having access to see the knowledge. That's why sometimes many people say that if you want to protect your software code, it's not a so good idea to patent it, because actually you have to deliver the source code to everyone. Then, the patents are viable in countries in which the application is filed and then granted. Meaning, if I apply for a patent in Greece, it doesn't mean that my idea or my invention is protected in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal. You have national patents, a national patent system. You have European patents, which are also subject to a different system, different procedure. You have the so-called unitary patents. That is, you can cover how many countries, in which countries you would like to patent your invention. You may, for example, if you develop a solution for managing drought in agriculture, you wouldn't like to patent it in Sweden or in Finland because you more or less know that in these countries this invention is not needed at all. And of course, you have the part of international registration, which is the most expensive one and the most complicated procedure that offers you the possibility to patent your invention in all the countries of the world, at least the members of the relevant organization, which is practically 152 countries. Now, the utility model is, let's say, a light version of the patent. It is aimed to protect my own inventions and minor improvements of existing products, which is about changing some configuration, some structure, some constitution, etc. You have in EU, we have the legal framework for utility models in 17 countries. And in the utility model is a lighter method that the application model, the application process is also relatively lower in terms of duration. It's less years that the utility model maintains your rights. It's obviously also a cheaper registration process. But generally speaking, we can consider that the patent is a way stronger form of protecting your intellectual property when it comes into inventions, in technical inventions. Now, the industrial design gives you protection of an ornamental or aesthetic feature of the product. This means that the design can be protected if it has an individual character or if it has a novelty. And the duration is 25 years, but every 5 years you will need to pay a renewal fee. More or less, EU has harmonized industrial design protection across all member states. So practically, you can also have unitary protection through a single procedure. The trademark is, as we know from this TM sign, is a sign or a combination of signs that we use to identify a distinguished good of service. It holds for 10 years, and things that can be protected as trademarks include words, letters, numerals, pictures, shapes, colors, and combinations of the above, as long as they consist a brand, as long as they can be distinctive, they are not deceptive or descriptive, and they do not belong to the exclusions provided by the law. And also a trademark needs to be conformed with public order and morality. So there are certain things you cannot use as trademarks. Now, the copyright, as we said, I will go very quickly with this one. The copyright more or less protects literary and artistic works. The thing is that it lasts during the lifetime of the author plus 70 years after his or her death, and the owners of the copyrights have the right to copy or reproduce, to distribute to the public, to perform, to translate in other languages, and to adapt. The most important thing and the most difficult to distinguish is between something that is patentable and something that is confidential business information. This is what we call a soft IP, and it's really difficult to define. Now, some confidential information may be your own sales method or marketing strategy. Going back to the discussion, as I was telling, the most important aspect is to be able to distinguish the so-called confidential business information or soft IP. This might be some customer profile. This might be some sensitive details of your company related to its financial transactions. These are not things that can be protected through patents or through any other of the means we discussed before. Here, what you need to know is to create what we call a culture internally with your company or with your close associates related to the trade secret. And one thing can be described as a trade secret when it is, let's say, if it is known, it will give the competitor some advantage over the company. This information also gives the company right now an economic advantage, and the company needs to take reasonable efforts to protect the secrecy of the information. So you cannot register it at all. You have to protect it by not disclosing it yourself and by making sure that the people within your team, or within your organization, or your direct associates who are involved into that do not have the right to disclose it, and there can be penalties for that. There can be clauses, particular clauses in your contracts, etc. Should I stop now and take the questions before we move to the IP and EU-funded projects? Any questions so far?
No, there is no questions so far.
Okay. If no questions so far, then let's move further. Let's try to look a little bit now how the intellectual property is managed in an EU-funded project, and then we can zoom in into the specificities of our project, of Quantify. First of all, we understand that since we are all developing knowledge here, we need to have a convincing outline of our IP management and exploitation strategies, both at the company, at the organization level, but also at the consortium level. And we have done that already. A draft of that already existed in the proposal. Then, keep in mind that the results of the research and developments that take place in the course of a project, they will need, if someone needs to really exploit them financially, if someone needs to really bring them into the market, they will require substantial investment. And it would be a suicide to do these investments without having prior protect your intellectual property that is stemming from this research and development. And last but not least, having a very clear IP management strategy and the workshops that we're doing now and the work that we will do in the future will help us to have a smooth collaboration among us, to avoid conflict between the partners, and to make sure that partners are working collectively towards a common goal. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these concepts, but let's take them to see a little bit one by one. The key terms related to the IP in the context of Horizon projects are background, foreground, access rights, exploitation, and dissemination. Let's look at them in detail. When it comes to background, it's actually what we already had prior to joining the project. This means, do we have some IP that we already want to protect or we have already protected? Do we have a patent and we're entering with that into the consortium? Do we have some specific method or some specific, let's say, tools that we have developed in the course of other projects or through unreturned sources? And it's necessary for the project, but we want to make sure from the very beginning that it's ours and people who will have access to it cannot use it outside of the scope of the project. Important to know. And this, if you remember, this was a question that has been asked to all of you during the consortium agreement. Then we have the foreground. The foreground is the things we are going to generate during the project. The new methods, the new source code, the new activities, the new tools, all this stuff. These are the results that we are going to create together, either each one of us individually or sometimes collectively, and then it becomes more interesting during the project. Then we have the access rights. The access rights are, in fact, the possibility of us to access the background and the foreground that other people own. The background that other people are bringing into the project and the results that we're going to generate in the duration of the project. Then, exploitation means either using the results in further research activities, or making a product out of these results, or a service or a process which is marketable, or some standardization activities, or transfer of results and licensing them, or even in some cases a spin-off company based on the results of the project. Exploitation in plain terms is every possible way to earn either directly financially or as a part of further research from the results of the project. And last but certainly not least is the dissemination of results. Who can talk about the results? Can be public disclosure. We will put it in peer-reviewed papers, conferences, publications, the topic of open access, the website, etc. Okay, let's look those one by one. Background IP. This is, as we discussed, the IP assets that we bring to the project and we have created prior to that. Inventions, databases, know-how, methods, etc. It's very important that we mention this IP in the consortium agreement. This means that every partner in the consortium agreement was asked to mention, to write clearly what intellectual property we are bringing inside the project that is necessary for the implementation of the project, but is ours. We have created prior. Generally speaking, in principle, it's a good idea to give access rights on background to other partners when this is needed in order to do their job. For example, I'll give you a simple example for our case for FoodScale Hub. We have developed some tools and methodologies for the dissemination, for the communication, and for the exploitation of results. Or some tools and knowledge related, for example, this IPR workshop. We mentioned that this is our property. Obviously, we're giving access to you because we're delivering the training to you and you will have access to these presentations. But that doesn't mean that we're giving you the right to take this presentation exactly as it is and give a training the next morning on your name and delete Quantifarm and put the logo of your company. There are some other cases, legal or other restrictions, that may impose to not give access to some parts of the background, to some partners, for whatever the reason. In this case, this also needs to be noted in the consortium agreement prior to the signature, which means that the access rights during the project should be royalty-free. It means that I cannot charge you to give you an IP workshop content during the project. We are participating in the same project and I'm giving it to you as part of our obligation. But after the project, that might be the possibility that we have to have access right on a fair and reasonable conditions. Which means that, for example, if someone that participates today after the end of the project tells me that, you know, we would like to have an IP workshop in our company for the same purpose, that might be that we agree that either I give it on a reasonable price or I give it on some exchange of other knowledge that we will receive from you or other services we will receive from you, and so on and so forth. Now, let's talk a little bit about the foreground of IP, which is also actually the project result. In order to prove that you are the owner of what you create, you certainly need to create, to be able to keep the documentation that you really created this IP. Now, going to that, the outcomes that we generate during the project, inventions, databases, know-how, knowledge, and methods, is actually the project results. It's the foreground IP. And then the easy part is when a single organization generates this IP. Then we're talking about single ownership, and a very simple rule applies. Who generates it, owns it. The most interesting part and the tricky part arises when we have to discuss about joint ownership, when we have to discuss about partners who are jointly producing some result. And then the partners automatically become joint owners, and there have to be rules and terms about their, this joint ownership. In that case, in order to avoid drama and in order to avoid, let's say, conflicts, what we want to do is to identify those joint ownership results from the very beginning and support the process that the partners make a joint ownership agreement in writing that defines the rights, the obligations of each of the parties. With respect to the access rights to the results, the thing is that still partners must give to each other access to the information needed to perform their tasks. And this is also a subject of discussion, meaning that if you believe that a partner should not have access to some results because you have created them, but you want to protect them as your IP and you want to protect them commercially, this is something you should raise directly to the consortium and we discuss it openly and make a collective decision. One important thing with respect to the results is obligation to protect them if they are protectable. For example, every result must be examined. Can it be commercially or industrially exploited? Is it possible and reasonable to protect them? Meaning, sometimes some method might be commercially exploitable. We can indeed start a service or a spin-off or whatever, and we can start exploiting it. But it's not possible for us to take a patent, or it's not possible for us to take some kind of legal form of protection. In that case, obviously, we will not be able to do that. Things that we need to take into account is that we should not unintentionally disclose information. For example, if we want to write a blog post or a scientific paper related to the project, we should always make sure that we don't include confidential information. Likewise, if we ourselves want to protect something, we should be very careful about not disclosing it, but also in case we have to communicate it internally to some other partner to explain them that this is not a publishable information. And also, we as IP management team, we should be in the position to approve the publication of the content, which is kind of joint ownership or belongs to other parties, etc., prior to its publication to any of the channels, either of the consortium or of our external channels. Then, obviously, this comes a little bit in the conflict of our obligation to disseminate the results. Keep in mind that we are obliged to disseminate the results swiftly by any appropriate means to the broader public, to the scientific community, to the professional community, etc. But when we are publishing, we need to make sure that we are not infringing the intellectual property rights of third parties, meaning of other partners within the consortium. Commission supports very much open access as a general principle when it comes to scientific dissemination, and we will give specific aspects to that. But dissemination activities are also listed in the exploitation dissemination plan. So the process, the boring process that we are doing so often to ask you what you are planning to disseminate, which events are you going to go, which articles you are going to go, apart from serving the purpose of keeping a good housekeeping of our dissemination and communication activities, it also serves the purpose of helping us identify potential risks that the dissemination of results will not take place before decision related to its possible protection. And also keep in mind that all the dissemination of results produced in the project, since we are spending taxpayers' money, they need to have the expression, they need to have a statement that our action that produced this result received funding from the European Union, and the same standard, the same applies also to standardization activities. Let's look a little bit at the exploitation. We are not getting into a European project just for scientific exchanges, but we have the obligation to exploit and ensure the exploitation of the results. There are many ways to do that. First of all, some people can use the results in further research activities. This mostly applies for the academic institutions and the research organizations. Private sector companies might choose to develop, create, and launch in the market a product or a service or a process. But also, we may be able to use them in standardization activities, use case scenarios, information to policymakers, or use them for educational purposes. This helps us realize that the distinction between exploitation might be commercial and non-commercial. Commercial exploitation is the one that generates financial transactions, that we issue invoices and we get paid, it's clear. The non-commercial are all the other parts that the results are becoming useful to either one individual organization or to a broader group of stakeholders or to a third party, but without directly having some financial transaction associated with that. Obviously, European Commission is very keen if they realize that we are using and exploiting the results in every possible way. Even third parties exploit the results with some way, because it's actually, they want to see the return of the investment of the taxpayers' money on our project. Also, while the exploitation takes place in some reasonable time during the project or a little bit after 1 year, then it's a very good idea to use the Horizon Results platform to make the exploitable results visible. This is a request from the Commission, but it's also a very good opportunity for us to promote the activities of our project. Now, what happens when we have to talk about publications? That's why we're asking as soon as possible to let us know what publications you are planning to create. By giving a brief abstract and by telling us more or less what you are planning to publish, we can then know, and it's a very good practice if you also contact the people who are involved somehow in the creation of these results to ask them if they would like to be involved in the publication. It very often happened to me that one scientific team publishes the results of the project, and while they have worked with other researchers from other institutions to create those results. They don't mention them anywhere, they don't communicate with them, and then we have dramas and discussions in the consortium, why you publish the results without me, etc. So one thing it's recommended to do is to communicate among each other when creating joint results, or let us know also if needed to make sure that we want to take it further. Also, whenever you are making a presentation, you have to make sure that you are not disclosing anything that is the IP of other partners. And also, we need to have to give enough time to partners to approve things. So if there is something that, for example, let me put it, if I have to put a publication and I have to include some presentation, I have to include some device, technical design, formula that some other partner has generated, I need to inform them at least 45 days prior to the publication in order to get the final approval. These things are quite sensitive. They are all included in the guidelines you have here, but also included in various documents and guidelines that exist in the consortium agreement. And it's very important to study them and make sure we avoid conflicts. Obviously, if you are presenting a work that has been generated only by you, you don't need to go through this process. But keep in mind that everyone who is presenting information is bearing the responsibility of violating any of those rules with whatever that means. So the advice I would like to pass through this process is always advise your peers, always talk with your peers when you are presenting part of the work that is theirs. You need to make sure that what you are presenting is free of confidential information, unless you have the approval of the owner. It's free of declared background and foreground IPR of partners, again, unless you have the written approval of the partners. It needs to be approved that it is like that. And it needs also to be in accordance with the funding regulation. And last but not least, it needs to be in a manner that is convincing the stakeholders that you are approaching. Let's now talk about the open science and the open access that has been a mantra of the European Commission for quite some time. First of all, the open access is mandatory for Horizon projects when it comes to scientific publications and research data. Of course, someone can opt out if there are legitimate reasons which are related to the trade secrets or business strategy, but in principle, open access is indeed enhancing the innovation capacity because, technically speaking, the society, taxpayers, represented by the Commission, is spending money so that we generate knowledge that in principle should be available to the other scientists and should generate enough impact to the society and to economy. Also, the open access helps you to validate the research results and data and to put them in front of eyes of many other peers, of many other scientists to receive criticism. And we all know that this is the way that science moves forward. In that case, for scientific publication, they expect platinum open access. This means that you have to use trusted repositories. Open doesn't mean unprotected. Copyrights, IP rights apply to the underlying content, but it's just that you have to express it clearly in your statement. Let's look a little bit now, focus on the 5 key exploitable results of Quantify. The results with commercial use are actually the toolkit and the DIA. But we have very important results which have been identified and that are not directly of commercial use. This might be, and they are also related to the commercial results. For example, the behavioral analysis methodology, the assessment framework, the toolkit, the DIA, and the policy monitoring tool are important key exploitable results. However, they are not expected to generate financial transactions. They are not expected to be financially, commercially exploited. During the project lifetime, all of the results will be openly accessible and available free of charge. After the project results, the toolkit and the DIA can be sustained and further developed, and business models which are related to the commercial use will have to be identified. This is also part of our exploitation activities and the relevant workshops we are doing. Should I stop here and ask if there are any questions in order to, before we proceed further?
No, we don't have any questions in the chat box.
Anybody who would like to ask a question live so far? Okay, it seems that either I'm bombing you with information that you don't have time to process, or all of this is known to you. Anyhow, let's continue. Now, let's look a little bit at the exploitation activities that we're going to regularly evaluate and monitor during and after the end of the project. As we discussed, there are many ways that project results can be exploited. Financial exploitation is the most obvious one, to sell them as a product, as a service to third parties. Further research and development that steps upon those results is also another way of exploitation. This is normally the way that research institutes move on. Education is another, community building is another, knowledge transfer is another, and policy and contribution to policy is a very important aspect as well, particularly in the course of Quantifarm, because this is also a specific work packaging. As a first thing, what we have done is we have created an online tool that we want to keep an inventory of key exploitable results, IPRs, and we have asked the partners to explain the scope of exploitation, the target groups, the means of exploitation, and also to identify IPRs. Probably some of you know this form because you have been asked to fill it in, and you will be asked to update it regularly in the lifetime of the project. If we would like to go one by one, I think we still have some time. And if we would like to see key exploitable results one after the other, let's talk first about the behavioral analysis methodology. Here, we have the participation of TNO, Luke, Tsegask, and Filagro. And the scope is, I would say, rather non-commercial. We're talking about scientific exploitation and training and education. So the means have been defined, and also the linked IPRs have been defined. Any comment on that? This is actually the thing that we got from you. Next one is the assessment framework. Again, the partners who will exploit it, Polymin, Europublic, Luke, Agricultural University of Athens, Horta, and Filagro. The scope will be scientific and policy making, again, non-commercial, but there are some linked intellectual property rights on behalf of Europublic and Agricultural University of Athens that are planning to protect them through a copyright, the content they create in the assessment framework. Then, a first potentially commercially exploitable asset is the Quantifarm toolkit. As we said before, during the lifetime of the project, the toolkit will not be a commercial service, will be provided free of charge. But after the lifetime of the project, some partners, in collaboration or individually, might decide to exploit whole or parts of the toolkit, so that the exploitability is scientific, commercial, but also related to policy making. Here, we have some partners who are planning to protect parts of their contribution through copyright, but we also have Tsegask that they are presenting the possibility of protecting somehow the soft skills that they are going to be included in the toolkit. Another one with the same category, meaning that now not commercial, but in the future commercial, is the Quantifarm Digital Innovation Academy, the DIA. And here, some copyright from GEA might be expected, but also there are many other partners who have ideas about how to exploit it in the future. The Digital Innovation Academy, together with the toolkit, might be the part that we're going to focus on during our exploitation strategies to identify relevant business models and to identify methods and ways that we can move it forward. That might be commercial, that might be not directly commercial. This is an assignment of us collectively to discuss and see which potential business models can bring the best results. Now, the policy monitoring tool, this is a tool for policymakers. It's not commercially exploited, but nevertheless, the partners who are going to introduce their own knowledge into the tool might protect this knowledge through copyright. Now, the second step of the exploitation methodology is, since we have already identified the exploitable results, is running exploitation strategy workshops. One has been already done. And in these workshops, we would like to help provide a detailed explanation of the potential of the results and make sure that we fine-tune the wish and the plans and the agendas of the partners who are in charge of exploitation with the overall project exploitation plan. This means that these iterations are going to go deeper and more concretely every time on topics which are related with exploitation. Possibly we need to discuss in detail about the potential business models. We need to discuss how we can incorporate this to broader agendas of companies or initiatives by the European Commission. And generally speaking, it's going to be an activity that will span across the entire lifetime of the project. And if we are lucky enough and successful enough, hopefully and after the duration of the project, because some things, for example, the Digital Innovation Academy is something that indeed deserves to go further together with the toolbox. And then we have to see a little bit concrete exploitation strategies, partner by partner, but also as a whole, about the concrete key exploitable results. Here you can see already some tables that we have created for that purpose. There is a matrix to be implemented. There is a matrix that we have to look in detail. We have to look about potentials of making products, of owning the results in order to develop further into products in the future, of licensing the results, or any other exploitation means one can come up across. And then we need to understand a little bit the fourth step, which is a unique exploitation approach. Here we have a characterization of exploitable results that we are looking deeper in the market. Who can be the customer of some results? What is the time needed to launch the product? If we have an idea about the size of the market we're approaching, what is a total addressable market? If we know more or less, if we can define the price range for the products or the services we're going to sell, the competition, and how these results stand against the competition, and then to identify go-to-market strategy, the steps towards exploitation. When can we achieve it? What are the foreseen barriers? What are the costs? What are the partners that will lead and the momentum towards exploitation? And of course, if there are issues that need to be protected in the course of intellectual property rights. I think I have spoken too much today. It's maybe time for questions or conclusions to see how we're doing with what is your feedback and what are your reflections over the content that has been presented.
Hello, please, if you have any questions, raise your hand or just unmute the microphone and make the question. Thank you.
Lisa, please.
Okay, hello. Thanks for this presentation. Luke was mentioned many times that we have plans to exploit the results in many ways, just sometimes just passing through or then finding any solutions connected to data spaces and so. But then what is then the question when preparing to exploitation is that how mature these results will be then, that where we should start when we exploit. So what kind of customers we are seeking for? Is it something that we need to develop a lot further, the results, or is it something that is kind of market ready and so forth?
This is a very good question. This is an assessment that we will do during the exploitation workshops. I'm not in the position right now, I don't have in front of me the results and which level they are, but I think part of our exploitation activities would be exactly as you said very well, to assess the maturity of the results, to assess the next steps needed, and to decide together if this is feasible and this is in alliance, in alignment with the agenda and the strategy of you as an individual organization.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that, Lisa, for asking at least one question. I will be really disappointed if I go home and nobody asks me a single question. So maybe some other colleague feels my stress and wants to ask another one.
Just a comment regarding, hi, Grigoris and Mariana.
Hello, Mariana.
Regarding DIA and IP, I think that I think it's not because NP it's the leadership of this task 5.1 regarding where to from DIA.
Okay, we will double check again the possibilities, but generally speaking, I think that was given to us by the the questionnaires.
Yes, that information comes from the online tool that we shared with all the partners. It is something that we must see again and update it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's double check this to make sure that we fine tune and indeed we don't have any conflicts between the two companies. I know you are closely collaborating, but still.
Yeah, we are sister companies, but yes.
Let's make it proper. I agree with you. The good comment.
Okay, thank you.
Vanya, you normally have questions and comments to make. What's going on? Give me a comment.
Everything is clear. Thank you very much for organizing this presentation. I have to admit that I'm multitasking, but 1 year is dedicated to you, as always.
Okay.
Thank you.
1 year of you is enough for me. I'm happy. Any other questions? Yes, Kestutis.
I have a short question. Is it, are we going to kind of prepare, how to say, during the project, are we going to prepare a kind of list of potential solutions, and then we can see who is owner of which solution, etc. You know, to have a table or something like that.
Exactly. The last table I showed you, let me go back to the presentation. Sorry to share my screen again. The last table I showed you, pretty much here, you will find all this information. This is let's say, under construction because it's a matter of the exploitation workshops that we're going to do. But certainly at the end of the project, this could be filled in. And hopefully, if we get credible information from everyone, that would reflect, it will be reflected in this table.
And it means that we need to identify the IP ownership of each exploitable result.
Exactly.
Okay, clear.
Okay, let's give Dionysius.
Hi, this is Dionysius from YEA. I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for such an insightful presentation and all the information provided. My question has to do with the commercialization of project results after the project end. It can be the Digital Innovation Academy or the toolkit. Should we go with a collective approach, setting a marketing or a commercialization plan that is agreed with all the consortium partners on a collective way? Or each partner may draw up a commercialization strategy that fits their own needs and interests, having a consent from the rest of the partners, of course.
This is a very good question. Actually, we believe that, first of all, let's clarify that the partners involved are the ones who participated in the development. We as Foodscale Hub, that we do not participate in the development of the Digital Innovation Academy, for example, we should not have a say on how this will be commercialized. So we already have a smaller team that does not include all the partners, but the ones who participate in the development. For those, I think we should apply a mixed approach, both bottom-up and top-down, meaning, of course, each partner should identify their own agenda and their own strategy, but ideally, if we have a joint development, we go back to the topic of joint ownership that I showed in my presentation. And this means that the best idea is that the 5, 6, 7, I don't remember off the top of my mind, partners which are involved in the development of DIA should sit down and make a joint ownership agreement. And then they can define.
But it might be the case that the materials created in the context of the Digital Innovation Academy activity rely on knowledge produced in the context of work package 1 or any other work package with partners that are not directly involved in the DIA. So it means that we capitalize on knowledge produced by their participating organization and may have the right to advise and provide their approval if they want to be engaged in such a commercialization plan or not.
But here we have to distinguish between the DIA as a service and the content of the courses, the content of knowledge. The content of knowledge belongs to each individual partner, and TNO might decide to provide its content to DIA, and the Europublic might decide not to provide its content to DIA. That's another story. But the DIA per se is actually also a platform. It's a technical construction. And then the partners who participate to the development of DIA decide first if they will commercialize it or what will be the terms of use and the business models. And the other partners decides if they have created this particular course or, let's say, body of knowledge, they can decide if they want to contribute it to DIA with the terms that DIA offers or whatever terms they negotiate or not.
Okay, thank you.
Let's give it a couple of seconds more if we have any questions. If not, we are very, very grateful that you found the time. The participation to the workshop was really encouraging. Keep in mind that it's a series of workshops and activities related to IPR and related to exploitation that we will continue. In the meantime, our team is at your disposal for any questions or any issues you want to raise. We encourage you to help us in delivering the input we need in order to make these things work and in order to make these things useful for you and your agendas inside this project. Thank you very much once again for your time, and we'll be in touch for the next activities.